Hello everybody, this is Mr. Rob and welcome back to another episode of the South Carolina Gamecocks Dynasty here on EA Sports College Football 25, where today the 2027 season is over, so we're going to recap the year that was year 4 for the South Carolina Gamecocks and take a look around the country and set the stage for another off season. So if you're excited for this one, make sure you drop a like and you subscribe down below, especially if you want more Dynasty Mode content, because you're going to see a lot more of the Gamecocks in the next few weeks. If you're not here in yesterday's episode, we are discontinuing the athletics franchise, and it'll be the show at 24. So right now, this is the only big series we have going on the channel, which means we will have a lot more episodes coming in the next few weeks. And it's becoming a good time because the Gamecocks are starting to become a really good team. So let's not waste any more time as we get ready for this one. If you missed the last episode, we also saw the national championship. It was an instant classic as the Tennessee Volunteers dropped to the Miami Hurricanes. Here's a look at the bracket. 48-45 in a high-scoring duel. But for the first time since 2001, 26 years, the Miami Hurricanes are your college football national champions. As far as the Gamecocks, here's how their season went. They started off beating South Carolina State 45-10. Then we beat Appalachian State 27-17 before losing to Miami, the team that just won the national championship, 25-18 in a close battle. We threw an interception in the end zone that would have tied the game and sent it to overtime, but it just wasn't meant to be. After that, we had just two dominating performances, slaughtering Mississippi State 35-7, slaughtering Kentucky 24-3. Had all the momentum going into the world to the swamp, and we lost to the Gators 38-17. And it was our ugliest performance. Reno threw 3 interceptions. We just did not look good. And then we went to the bye week trying to fix things, getting ready for another tough game against Georgia. And we lost this one as well, 19-13. We lost it in overtime. It was a heartbreaking game, and at this point, we just were kind of the team that beat all the unranked teams. When it came to face a team in the top 25, we just couldn't get it done. And that was just kind of who we were as we went to the next game, and that was even more solidified. We just destroyed Arkansas 42-7. Then we got ready for that 4-game gauntlet against 4 of the best teams in the country, and it's like, here we go. Top 25 opponents. We're not very good against them. Then we beat Auburn 34-20 in a pretty good performance in Williams-Brice. And we're like, okay, we're feeling pretty good about ourselves. We have Tennessee up next, and that was our biggest upset last year. We went into Knoxville and beat Tennessee. So, hey, we got them at home this year. We're playing good football. And we got destroyed 48-28. And just a game that the Volunteers just overmatched us. Like, we had no chance in this game. We didn't play the worst football on offense, but the defense just could not stop all the playmakers on Tennessee's side. Then we had to rebound, go to Texas for the first time, and we won 31-17. Texas was a ranked team at this point. They're not anymore, but, another big win, especially on the road. The Gamecocks are playing good football in time for the rivalry against Clemson, a team we have not beaten in this series. It was a classic, and we knocked off the Clemson Tigers 31-28. A missed field goal from Clemson did them in, and we went 3-4 in those last games against 4 ranked opponents. So we feel like we turned the corner, went 8-4 going into the bowl game. Hopefully, we were ranked number 18 with a chance to, get a good bowl game. And we went back to the Music City Bowl. Felt a little bit of a disappointment. I thought we deserved like the Gator Bowl or the Tax Slayer Bowl or the Cheez-Its Bowl or something. We went back to the Music City Bowl against UCLA and proved that we were definitely not supposed to be there as we beat them 41-3. It's not showing up here, but we slaughtered them. We went 9-4 and 5-3, and it looks like we have finished number 17th in the country. As here's a look at how the final 25 went. Miami obviously number 1. They were the best team. They won the national championship. It was a chaotic sort of end. Still don't get why West Virginia is 6-7 and ahead of us. That makes no sense. But nonetheless, we finished 17th in the final rankings, which sets us up nicely for next season. In terms of the conferences in the SEC, we finished 8th in the conference, 9-4 and 5-3. Just a step below some of these tough teams like Tennessee, Auburn, Missouri had a good season. Texas a little disappointing, but they were good. Oklahoma, they only went 7-6, but they went 5-3 in the SEC. Florida, who we lost to, had a good season. Georgia, who we lost to, had a good season. The SEC is just a tough conference. But anybody below us, we did pretty well against. We beat Arkansas bad. Texas A&M was a little bit of a down team this year. Kentucky made the top 25, but we beat them pretty bad. Ole Miss, they had a little bit of a bounce-back season. They won 3 conference games this year. Last year, they won 0. Alabama had a bad year, only 2-6 in the SEC. LSU as well, 4-8. Then Vanderbilt and Mississippi State usually pulling up the rear. As far as the other conferences, we'll start with the Power 4. Clemson won the ACC, as followed by Miami were the top 2 teams. Then you see Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Pittsburgh on a couple of 6-2 squads. As far as the Big 12, TCU had the best record, 6-3 over Arizona. But the Wildcats did win the conference. They won the Big 12 championship and finished in the college football playoff before getting knocked out by Clemson. In the Big 10, that's been usually the best conference in this sort of series. USC went 8-1, and they won the Big 10. Penn State there as well. Rutgers, Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan, a lot of tough teams. Washington also finished ranked. Oregon only went 8-5. That's a little bit disappointing for them. As far as the Power 5, or the Group of 5, I should say, UAB was the class of this conference. They were the number 1 seed actually going into the college football playoff, which is insane, as they won the AAC. And we went into the Conference USA. Liberty had the best record. They finished 8-6, but it was Florida International who actually won the conference, beating Liberty in the CUSA championship. And it was just a little too late for the Panthers, as they could have got the Group of 5 spot, but UAB was just so dominant. In the MAC, Buffalo and Ohio went at it. Ohio ended up winning the MAC conference in a pretty good game. Actually, I'm sorry, it was Buffalo who won. Sorry, I had that backwards. They beat Ohio. In the Pac-7, it was Boise State who won the conference. As you know, good for them. The Mountain West team's coming over and doing some damage out there. And speaking of Mountain West, UNLV gets it for them, and they will be welcoming in Northern Illinois next season. And the Sun Belts, it was Louisiana who had the best record out there in the conference. And then, of course, in the FBS and the Independents, it was really Notre Dame that went 9-4. They were actually the number 1 seed, number 1 ranked team going into the college football playoff, but they don't play in a conference, so they couldn't get the first round bye, and they lost to Clemson in the first round, so unfortunate for them. Then how about UConn, finishing on 4 straight victories out there? We'll go into our player stats now. Well, actually, we'll take a look at All-Americans. I haven't taken a look at them. Well, I have, but you haven't. And we get a first-team All-American in Wade Mann, who had a great season, led the country in rushing yards, the redshirt freshman. 4-star from Fayetteville, North Carolina, so that was good to see. And we didn't have any other first-team All-Americans. Second team, we did not as well. But all-freshman team, we had a few. Wade Mann, of course, gets it. And then we also, well, actually, sorry, I thought we had a few. We only had 1. We don't care about the preseason. That's done and dusted. As far as the SEC All-Americans, Wade Mann is up there. Cam Pringle got All-SEC left tackle. We're going to miss him next year as he graduates. Vic Burley as well. Got him in the transfer portal. Played really good. I'm surprised you don't see Abena Onwuka on here. I thought he was really good. Second team, Jason Baquette gets it for the tight ends. Have a little bit of a better season. Finally found the end zone this year as a junior. And then again, no Abena Onwuka. So I thought that was a little bit of a slap in the face. As far as freshmen, here we go. We have Vernon Ryder as an all-freshman first team in the SEC, as well as Ari Bighill, who didn't even play really this year, which means, you know, he should be in line for a pretty big season. I expect Bighill to get a starting spot from Somerville High School, and we'll see how he does. Now we'll get into the stats, though, of the players. This is where we spend most of our time. As we go through season stats, starting off with the quarterback position, Dante Reno had a much better junior season. 3,100 yards, 31 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He got the interceptions under control. He got the completion percentage a lot better, and it showed for it. He threw for 70 more yards, 6 more touchdowns, 12 less interceptions. Completion percentage went up by 8%. You know, the yards per average is up. He was kind of thrusted into the starting job last year when Lenore Sellers transferred. And this year he got comfortable, and he played great down the stretch. You know, we started off, you know, he threw for 4 against South Carolina State, great. Looked good against Appalachian State. Threw 2 against Miami, interceptions-wise. 3 against Florida, 1 against Georgia, 1 against Arkansas. But this is where he really turned the corner. 5 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 2 against Tennessee, 3 against Texas, 2 against Clemson, and 4 against UCLA, where he was benched for the entire fourth quarter. Dante Reno really had a good junior year. I'm excited to see what he'll do next year as a senior for this team. As far as rushing, Wade Mann led the way, 1,300 yards on 287 carries. That is an insane amount of carries. 7 touchdowns. He really exploded as the bell cow back. I'm super excited for him going into next season. I honestly was a little bit unsure about the halfback position because Braylon McReynolds graduated. He was our starter last year and the year before. But Wade Mann stepped up. Him and then John Hajrullahu as well, another freshman halfback who had 261 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wasn't as good as Mann, but I think he's a good change of pace for Wade Mann. They're both freshmen, so they both should be on this team for a couple of seasons. That's if John Hajrullahu does not transfer, which is something we got to actually keep in mind. Monty Soro did have a couple of touches, so if Hajrullahu does transfer, I do have a lot of faith in Soro. I think he's a good back. You know, he got more carries last year as a freshman, but just kind of got pushed to the back of the pile. And he played pretty good. I mean, 4.5 yards per carry is something respectable, so I'd like to see him maybe get some more touches next season. And then Dante Reno also had a couple of touchdowns, but because of the sacks, you know, it goes down. But he had 2 as well, so 33 total touchdowns for Dante Reno this year. Receiving, this is interesting. It was a very parity at the receiving core. Nobody really stood out. Our highest receiving yards player was Wade Mann, who had 77 catches for 578 yards and 5 touchdowns. 578 yards was the most receiving yards on this team. We really spread out the football, and I feel like that helped the offense. You don't really have a number one. It was supposed to be DeBron Gatling this year. He had big plans, but he only had 28 catches. It was 541 yards, though, and 5 touchdowns, so he definitely made the most of his catches. But DeBron Gatling, it was just, we weren't throwing to our number one very often, and he kind of had a lot of quiet games. You can see early on, he got some targets early, had 2 touchdowns in the Miami game, only 1 catch against Kentucky and Florida, 2 catches against Georgia, 0 against Auburn, 1 against Texas. Had a good bowl game, though, against UCLA. He kind of just turned into the big hitting wide receiver, which is not what I really expected out of him, but it worked out. I would have liked to have gotten him the football more as a senior, but, it's just sometimes how the cookie crumbles. Then there was Vernon Ryder, the redshirt freshman from Sefner, Florida, who really stood out towards the second half of the season. 540 yards, 5 touchdowns, 16.9 average. He really exploded in the slot in the second half of the season. I think that's where we really came into our own. Quiet first half, 4 for 82 in a score against Arkansas. Then he had 3 straight weeks with a touchdown. Auburn, Tennessee. Quiet against Texas, a little quiet against Clemson, but then had a touchdown against UCLA. But he was a big proponent of that start against those ranked teams. He played really good, caught some touchdowns, and looks like one of our top receivers going to the next year, which is a position I'm a little worried about. I think we'll be a little thin at receiver. Both Gatling and Russell, who we will touch on in a minute, will be graduating. Jason McKidd is a junior tight end, 60 catches, 520 yards, 2 touchdowns, finally found the end zone. I don't like how we use the tight end as much in the passing game. I think that's one of the flaws of our offensive coordinator, but who will be around for next season. But Biquette is more of a blocking tight end. It's just not really his forte. But we didn't get him the football as much. At least he didn't lead the team in receptions. He was second. But at least he actually caught some more tough passes this year. And as a senior, even though he's still a blocking tight end, he should be a pretty capable receiving one as well. Then we had Elijah Caldwell, who had 45 catches, 431 yards, and a team-high 7 touchdowns. Kind of like Vernon Ryder, Elijah Caldwell came on strong towards the end of the season, but unfortunately he's also a senior, so he'll be graduating. As you can see right here in that same stretch, he had 5 touchdowns in the span of 3 games against Georgia, Arkansas, Auburn. 6 catches, 5 catches, 6 catches. Really did his work in the middle half of the season. Kind of faded a little bit. Had a pretty decent game against Clemson, though, finding the end zone. But Caldwell led the team in touchdowns. But him and Russell will also be graduating. So our top 3 wideouts, arguably, are all going to be graduates. Russell, 23 catches, 274 yards, 5 touchdowns. He was a red zone nightmare last year. I think he led the team outside of Nick Harbor in touchdowns last year. I thought he was going to do the same this season, but he kind of fell off towards the second half of the year. He had 3 touchdowns in the game against South Carolina State, but then got really quiet. 2 for -1, 3 for 25, 1 for 4, not a catch, 1 catch, 3 catches. He didn't really play a lot down the stretch. He was on the outside, and we focused a lot of our attack towards the middle of the field in the second half of the season. So Russell, kind of like Gatling, didn't get used as much as I would have liked, but he was a good wide receiver. He at least drew the defense out there. Azralau, who had a touchdown. Amari Allgaier also had one. He played pretty decent, redshirt sophomore. He'll get a chance in camp next year to try to be one of the starting wide receiver jobs who are up for grabs. And then Otis McNitt had 10 catches for 72 yards. I like him a lot as a backup tight end from Bowling Springs High School, who've had some success in the recruiting game out of that high school. So I'm excited to see what McNitt does. Maybe we go to a little more 2 tight end sets next year, especially with the receivers not as set in stone. As far as the offensive line, definitely a much better season for this offensive line. Last year was a struggle. This year a lot better, and it showed. Cam Pringle was the All-American or All-SEC at left tackle. Fortunately, though, he is graduating, so we'll have to replace him. There is Jatavius Shivers, who could get it. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. He's graduating as well. So left tackle could be a need for us. At left guard, John Roundtree, he was definitely the weak link of the bunch. The true junior from Abbeville High School, part of our first recruiting class. I do think he'll do a little bit better next year. He'll be a senior, and he'll be asked to really step up on that left side. Hopefully he can do that because he wasn't the best left guard this year. If he does struggle, like I said, there is Ari Bighill who could get some snaps in the next season, and I do expect to. Center was really good. Jason Zandamela was a really good center. It says he didn't allow a sack, and he did a very good job pancaking some guys as well. I am happy he's a redshirt junior. I expect him to come back next season. We got him in the transfer portal from Florida a couple of years ago, and he's been one of our best transfer portal pickups, and he'll continue to anchor the offensive line next year. At right guard, Kevin Fine was the starter as well. Actually, I'm sorry, it was Tenard Smith was the starter. Kevin Fine's there as well. Maybe one of them can shift to the outside if needed. But Tenard Smith was a pretty underrated right guard. I think he was a little bit better in the pass game than he was in the run game, but he did pretty good as well in the pulling scenarios. Then at right tackle, we had Josiah Thompson, the redshirt junior, who had a pretty good season. Not as good as Pringle, but I think he did overall pretty well. And if you look, we're only going to lose one lineman to graduation. So as long as nobody goes pro or nobody transfers, we'll have all 4 of the 5 same starters in the offensive line. So that's pretty good, I would say. Going over to the defense, we'll start with the defensive line. And this is the area I thought going into this year was my biggest question mark. We lost a lot of men on the defensive line. All of our starters were essentially transfers from last season. And boy, did they deliver. Obinna Onwuka led the team in sacks, 12.5 sacks for the redshirt junior. He came over from West Virginia in the offseason where he had 9 sacks last year and just picked up right where he left off. A speed rush on the outside, can get to the quarterback, is a junior. He'll be back next season. I love what we saw out of Obinna Onwuka. If you matched him up one-on-one against a left tackle who wasn't elite, he was winning that speed battle. And he should get to the passer a lot more next season. On the other end spots, it was kind of a rotation. You had Caleb Bryant, the Mississippi State transfer, 6.5 sacks, 16 tackles for a loss. He got in the backfield as well. There was also Derek Vincent Douglas, the Alabama transfer, who had 2.5 sacks, 7 tackles for a loss. His numbers are not as high as the other guys, but I do feel like Douglas ate up a lot of blocks. When we went to the nickel, he shifted a little bit inside, and he played really good. I was happy with what we saw out of him. And then we also had Vic Burley, 8.5 sacks, the Appalachian State transfer who started his career actually at Clemson. He will be graduating, though, so we will miss Vic Burley. But at least we have a couple of guys on the outside who can deliver. Shameik Jones had 2 sacks, the former Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. He will also be graduating. So defensive tackle is a little bit of a need for us. Defensive end we are pretty good at, though. As far as the linebackers, there's Desmond Umeozulu, who was really good. We will miss him as well. He had 6 sacks. He was a good pass rusher. 1 interception for him. And then on the other outside linebacker spot, Bryce Reeves, the captain of the defense, led with 111 tackles, 3 interceptions. He is a junior, so he should be back next season. I don't expect him to go pro. He had a really good year. He would probably be a pretty decent draft pick. But I do expect Bryce Reeves to be back on the team, and I'm happy because he was the captain, and he played really good. As far as other linebackers, Colby Boyette, the true sophomore, our first 5-star recruit in the series, he was great. 96 tackles, 9 tackles for a loss, 2 interceptions, 2 sacks. He did a really good job covering the middle of the field. I know Reeves led the way in tackles, but Boyette was right there as well. He could fly sideline to sideline, help in the run game. Because if you remember from last year, our run defense was really poor. And I think Boyette, even though he doesn't lead the team in tackles, had a big reason as to why we were such a better run defense team. He was flying, and he could get to the halfback. So I like what we saw of him. He's only a true sophomore, so we're guaranteed at least another season of him. And then right behind him, he didn't get a lot of playing time, was Torrey Perkins, a true freshman, another 5-star linebacker. So we have 2 5-star linebackers. Perkins wasn't as good coming out of high school as Boyette was. He was kind of a bust, actually, gym-wise, is what they said. But I do like what we saw to Perkins as well. I think him and Boyette could be a really good pair, along with Reeves. That's 3 solid linebackers. In the secondary, another position I was a little bit nervous of, they actually played really good. They did give us some big plays, but they also made some big plays. Jeff Rubin had 5 interceptions. He had the hat trick against Arch Manning. Picked him off 3 times in that Texas win. So he had himself a good season. He gave up a couple of big plays, though. True junior, more of a zone corner, which is what we play a lot of defensively anyway. So he should be back leading the way. There's also Deshaun Heap, the Benedict College JUCO man who stayed right here in Columbia. He had 3 interceptions. He came on strong towards the second half of the season. I think he played well. He got burned a couple times. The Clemson game, he gave up a deep ball. Wasn't really his fault. He tipped it, and it just ended up right into the hands of the Clemson receiver. But I like what we saw to Heap and Rubin. They'll be back next year as seniors. That's 2 seniors on the outside. Then you also have Owamagbe Ogbongbemiga, who also will be back as a senior. So our top 3 corners are all back next season, which is good to see. And there's also Malik Asante, who had a pick 6. He's a junior. He'll probably be the dime guy. So we return all the secondary. Danny Kaufman, the free safety, redshirt sophomore. He kind of got the opportunity. He had a really good camp. He has good development. I don't think he played overly that great this year, though. He was kind of a liability as far as the deep center of the field. I don't think both of our safeties are actually strong in sort of like cover 3 at deep middle of the fields anyway. Him and Sonny Gallen are not the best cover safeties, but they help out a lot in the run game. And then there was Nick Spitzer, who was the 3rd safety, and honestly, I thought he was the best safety. He was a low transfer we got a couple years ago from Ohio. He came over after his freshman season, and he played really good. He's kind of outperforming what a lot of people thought he would be, and I like him a lot as a 3rd safety. He could actually push Sonny Gallen maybe for some more playing time next year. But overall, the defense was our strength of this team next season. I'm glad we're only losing a handful of starters. Kicking, though, we will be losing our kicker, Mason Love, only 67%. He actually hasn't been the most accurate field goal kicker for us, but I did like him a lot. We at least already have a successor on the roster, Marquise Otogwe. So this will be our first kicker that did not start this series on our team, which is a little concerning because I'm not sure how good he really is. But he'll get the chance next year. Then Taylor Montez, the punter. Still not a good punter in my book. He doesn't have a lot of power. He'll at least be a senior next season. But if I can get like a punter in the transfer portal or something, I might try to replace him. I don't know. I'm surprised Montez has actually been the starter for 3 seasons because I have not liked him. But that does it for our team. Oh, yeah, the kick return, Mazio Bennett. And punt return, Mazio Bennett. 3 touchdowns in the punt return for him. An electric guy. He'll be a senior next year. He'll be the returner. Might even get some chances to play receiver. I mean, if he continues to be that dynamic on special teams, I'd like to try to get him the ball in his hands a little bit more. And obviously, losing our top 3 wide receivers, he'll get a chance to get that role next season. But that does it for our team. We'll go around the country. We'll first start off in the SEC as far as passers go. Lenore Sellers was the best quarterback this season in the SEC. He was a first-team All-SEC guy as well. Still kind of painful to see. Still a little salty that he left us, but I'm starting to get over it. I'm happy for him. Hopefully he gets a chance in the NFL. 4,100 yards for him, 41 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. As far as rushers, Wade Mann, like I said, led the way. Deshaun Bishop was there. Most touchdowns, though, on the ground goes to Jaquez Smith of Georgia with 14. Sellers had 11 as well, so he had over 50 touchdowns. I'm surprised Sellers didn't win the Heisman. DeMar Jerry had 11, and then Ben Choice had 10 for Texas. Receiving guy was Malachi Witt of Auburn. He led the way in receptions and yards. And then your touchdowns with 17 was Perry Thompson. Auburn had a very good offense this year. They had a really good year. Your worst offensive lineman was Antone Stroud, who gave up 16 sacks. Tackles was Bryce Reeves leading the way, followed by Denzel Kelly and Edmund Spillman. Tennessee has a great linebacker core, and they honestly both might be back next season. So I don't see, if they can replace Sellers at quarterback, Tennessee could be a team to watch out for again next year. Interceptions, it was Jonathan Gates of Kentucky. As far as the entire country, your leader in passing yards was Jose Jasmine, who had 5,387 passing yards. Like I said, he has been the best quarterback and one of the best recruits to come out of this series. 53 touchdowns as well, 16 interceptions, but right behind him was Christopher Vizina of Clemson. He had 4,900 yards, 53 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, the replacement of Heisman Trophy winner Cade Klubnik, and he did a pretty darn good job at it, since he will probably be playing on Sundays. Then you have Andrea Posey of UAB, who will be back next season, so I expect the Blazers to continue to be the group of 5 team to beat, and honestly another national championship contender with 49 touchdowns, 48 for CJ Carr. Your interceptions leader was Lucian Anderson III at a Bowling Green with 22. It's nice to see Dante Reno not at the top. 10 interceptions for a season for me is, I gotta pat myself on the back. Like I said, Wade Mann led the country in yards by 100 over Clemson's David Eziomumi, so both top running backs right here in South Carolina. The only thing is Mann had a lot more carries than anybody else. Bishop was actually right behind him, but you can see he got hurt, so that's something I do worry with Wade Mann. I'd like to maybe let him rest a little bit more next season. Your touchdowns leader was Elijah Davis of Louisiana with 16, followed by Jaquez Smith like we saw. In the receiving game, there was one guy who had 100 catches. It was Iverson Hooks of UAB. He will be graduating. He should be a good late-round selection, in my opinion. Receiving yards leader Dante Little of Miami, followed by Iverson Hooks, Montrell Hatton, and then Ronan Hannafin. Touchdowns with 22 was Iverson Hooks. That is a school record. So he will be sorely missed for the Blazers. Worst lineman in the country, Mitchell Cleveland out there in Miami, Ohio. Tackles leader was Malik Bryant. It was actually not Bryce Reeves. It goes to the Miami linebacker. Your sacks leader with 11 was Ty Lacey. Actually, Obena Nwuka gets it. Why does EA not know how to show your team's stats on defense when you go to the country stats? That's been a thing for years. I don't get it. Why do you not fix that? 8 interceptions led the way for Quentin Taylor of Iowa State. As far as your most accurate kicker, there were a couple guys who never missed. Liberty's kicker, Purdue's kicker, Arizona's kicker, and BYU's kicker. Kick return touchdowns, there was quite a few. Nobody had more than one. And then on punt returns, the only other guy who did not have one was Detrell Jones, who had 2 for Boston College. Now, I'm pretty sure he actually won the returner of the year. I mean, come on now. I think Mazeo Bennett has 3 touchdowns. Yes, he averaged 2 yards more, but come on now. Mazeo Bennett was dirty. But that is it for the stats, and I think that'll actually do it for this one. We'll take a look at career stats. I've been actually asked to show this more for some of our guys. Reno, here's his career stats, 56 touchdowns. As far as halfbacks, nobody really to show for. Receiving yards, Tyshawn Russell ends with 23 touchdowns and 1,500 yards. That's good. Gatling only ends with 672 because he really didn't get a chance till this season. Paquette has over 1,000 yards as well, but Tyshawn Russell's the big guy that's graduating. On defense, Bryce Reeves leads the team in tackles, and your sacks is Obena Nwuka, who has 28.5. Big Burley graduates with 14 career sacks, and Caleb Bryant graduates with 10. And then the interceptions, still Jeff Rubin with 5. Mason Love ends his college career with a 74%, which is pretty atrocious, but he never missed an extra point, so you do got to give him that. And then as far as punt return, Mazeo Bennett now has 5 return touchdowns. But that'll do it for this one. I think I've talked for a little bit too much. They're coming up on the 30-minute mark, and the next episode will be the off-season, which, hear this out, will be premiering tomorrow. By the time you watch this, you'll probably already see the notification for it in my YouTube channel. It'll be right here at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Was going to be the athletics, but we're ending that series. So we're jumping right into the South Carolina Gamecocks offseason. It's a big one because this team is on the verge of being good and being a national championship contender. So it's a pivotal offseason, probably one of the biggest ones in the series. Can we solidify this team as a national championship contender going into next season? We'll have to find out. But thank you guys so much for watching and listening. If you enjoyed, make sure you drop that like and you subscribe down below, especially if you want more Dynasty Mode content. This is Mr. Rob, and I'll see you in the next one.